seen someone litter? Like watched someone actually do it? Now, a few weeks back, it was one of those hot days after many days of rain. And so me and my friends were like, okay, we need to go outside and enjoy the sunshine. We're gonna sit outside all together. It'll be great. And I was asking my friends one of my very favorite questions. If you were to be a type of sandwich, what type of sandwich would you be? Now, some of my friends would say like ham and cheese, because I'm just plain and simple, nothing on it, just leave it like that. I would say if I were to be a sandwich, I would be an egg salad sandwich, because egg salad, like you can't just decide you're gonna have egg salad. No, you have to like plan ahead, you have to hard boil your eggs, then you have to mash them together. You probably wanna let it cool for a little while. I would be egg salad because I like to plan ahead a bit, be prepared for life. Now, we're sitting outside, beautiful day, and we're kind of sitting along this ledge, looking out over this big expanse of trees, and this ledge is kind of high, and so we're dangling our legs off the side of it, and below us is the tops of these trees, okay? And then of course, beneath the trees are all their trunks, and it goes way down into bush much further beneath it. And so we were eating our lunch, and I was setting out my lunch all in front of me. I had my muffin and my fruit and some cheese, and I even had some water, and I was laying it all out so I could eat it. But meanwhile, I had taken a bag that was in and just like tucked it behind me. Now, when I turned around, all of a sudden I looked, and this bag had been caught by a gust of wind, and it went up into the air, and I watched as it got pushed right out, and it started to settle over the tops of trees just beyond where I could reach. And I looked at it, and I said to my friends, I just littered. And sometimes I look at litter and I go, who would do that? But I did that, and I am not proud of it. But I'm sure you've heard lots about litter at school, and you've probably talked about it, or you've probably seen or made different posters telling people not to do it. Now, what about like pollution? Maybe you've seen or heard that. I Googled the definition of pollution, and it's something harmful or poisonous to its environment. Now, we see pollution all around us. We see bad things in the environment that quench the good, that are harmful to what's around it. We see this in oceans, in the atmosphere, with litter, literally all over the earth. But recently, I realized that there's actually more to pollution than just that. Can I let you in on a secret? As much as there's pollution in the world with garbage and fumes, there's also a little bit of pollution in each of us. Now, you might be thinking, well, Kara, of course, we get dirty, we play in the dirt, there's germs, we get sick, sometimes we eat junk food. But this pollution is more than that. It's more than physical things. This pollution actually comes from within us. In fact, it's less about what we put in and more about what comes out. You see, our heart is polluted. It's full of things that are not good, things that hurt others. And this pollution of our hearts, it's called sin, and each and every one of us has it. Sometimes the word sin can throw us off. Maybe we've heard about it in church, or so it feels like really normal to talk about, and we don't think it's a big deal. Or maybe on the other side, this word sin reminds us of experiences or things we've done or things that we just like feel gross thinking about afterwards. But what if we could get past some of these things that we feel with the word sin and see how it actually just separated us from God? We might actually start to see that sin is a really big deal, and each of us has this pollution in our hearts. Now, I'm going to ask you a question in a second, and it's this question. How does knowing that people are sinful help us to make sense of some of the bad things that are in the world? Now, I asked this question to some of my friends, and they gave a couple answers. They said, it makes me understand why bad things happen in the world. It gives me an answer for that. They also said, it makes me really rely on God more. And someone else said, it makes me feel like even the bad things can be made beautiful. So I'll ask you this question, and I'd love for you to answer it with the people around you. But it's this question: how does knowing that people are sinful help us make sense of some of the bad things in the world? This is Act 2 in the narrative that we're going to be talking about today. So in Genesis, we read about Adam and Eve. Now, Adam and Eve, the very first people, were given purpose and instructions on how to care for the world. They were also given food to eat, and in that, God gave them one singular instruction: Do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The one rule was to not eat from this tree. And so in Genesis 3, the story picks up. It says, "Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, 'Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?' 'You will certainly not die,' the serpent said to the woman, 'for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil.' When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate of it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Now, as Adam and Eve ate that fruit, they chose in that moment to go against God. They chose to rebel, which brought sin into every part of our world. We humans brought sin into the world. Sin does not play favorites. It doesn't just apply to the bad people who go to jail. It applies to each and every one of us. Each and every one of us has sinned and experienced the effects of sin. It's also not an old-fashioned thing. Sin is a present thing that we each still experience. And our natural tendency is to lean towards sin. We want to sin. Just the other day, I was at the beach and I saw this beach chair that I liked, and it was matching to the chair that I had, so I thought I could have 2 of those chairs if I were to just go steal that person's chair. Now, did I? No. But for like a split second in my head, that was like an option that I was thinking about. You see, we've all sinned in our lives, and so because of that, sin has an impact on every part of our world. The other day I was washing dishes, and I love a good story, so I was distracted and listening to what was going on in the other room. I had stopped paying attention to what's in front of me, as I'm washing, and before I know it, the glass was wet and slippery, and boom, I dropped it. Glass went everywhere. Pieces in every part of things, all the clean dishes I had washed, there was glass in there. And the same is true with sin. Once sin entered in, there was no withholding it. Sin went into every area of our life. But hear this, even though God did not want us to choose sin, God still had a plan to destroy sin and its effects. You see, I grew up in a place called Winnipeg, and in Winnipeg there's something called Garbage Hill. Now, it is super flat in Winnipeg. There are no mountains, not really any hills. So like any type of little bump really starts to stick out in the landscape. And so you're like, what is Garbage Hill? Well, Garbage Hill is literally that. They take all the garbage in the city and they pile it in this one spot. And over time, as garbage builds and builds, it starts to create this hill just outside the city. And in the winter, it actually almost looks like a mountain on the horizon as it's covered in snow. But in the summer, everything starts to heat up and it actually starts to stink a little. Have you ever been by like a garbage can on a really hot day that's been sitting there for a while? It is nasty. Now, with Garbage Hill, anyone who buys a house nearby Garbage Hill, they actually have to sign a document saying they won't complain if it stinks and the wind is blowing that smell into their yard. How wild is that, hey? Now, at some point, that hill, though, gets too big, and they can't keep adding garbage to it. So do you know what they do? They leave that one, and they actually go make another one. How wild is that? They start over from scratch with a brand new Garbage Hill. But do you know what happens with the old hill? As they leave it, over time, grass begins to grow. There's little flowers that start to bloom up. In the winter, families will go to Garbage Hill to go sledding. We would take our youth group there all the time. It was the best place because there aren't really any other hills in Winnipeg. But in the summer, you can no longer actually smell the garbage. It started to be green and luscious. Families will go there for picnics and to ride their bikes. It's so lovely, in fact, that other than the name, you would never know that it used to be a pile of literal garbage. You see, the pollution doesn't just disappear. It's still there, actually. But instead, there's something beautiful and joyful that's grown over top of that pollution. You see, God's plan was to make something beautiful out of the rubbish, to transform it. Even more than just covering up our pollution, the sin in our lives, He actually takes it away. You see, God had a plan to destroy sin, pollution, and its effects so that beautiful things can come out of your life, out of our lives. This can give us hope because sin will not win. We just don't have that final picture yet. Now, middle school, it can be a really tricky place. And there might be times in your life this year where you'll be tempted to like feel shame because of your sin. You might start to think things like, I'm unworthy or I'm unlovable. You might want to run and hide because of your sin. But in those moments, know that you are loved and know that you are forgiven. Now, although we have a sin issue, God had a plan to overcome it. God, through Jesus, dealt with the penalty of sin, dealt with the power of sin, and will deal with the presence of sin. This is why we have hope for what is yet to come. We live in the now and the not yet, that Jesus wins and sin and death do not get to dictate how we live our life. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next week.